I am autistic. I am proud to be autistic. I don't see autism as a disability, as something to be ashamed of. Now, I did not come to that naturally. I had to do a lot of work to get here. I didn't fit the stereotype of Asperger's, which later they decided was also just autism. So I wasn't diagnosed until I was 22 and was seeking therapy for relationship issues. And so by that time, I had so much shame around being broken and being wrong, and I couldn't follow rules, and there's something wrong with me, and punishment, and exclusion, and bullies, and so much shame. So actually discovering I was autistic was a little bit of a relief at that point, because it's like, oh, and now I understand what was going on. I wasn't just wrong or broken. I wasn't just not trying hard enough. I actually have a condition that makes this harder for me. So that requires full acceptance of being autistic. And it's not a disease to be treated. You are listening to Dedicated Joe, the new dad's guide on the upending and transformational experience of becoming a father. I want to talk today about what I think is the most important aspect of interacting with someone who's autistic, especially an autistic child. So for those of you who have kids who are autistic on the spectrum or might be, or you have friends and family in your life, or maybe you're autistic yourself, the most critical thing to me that leads to somebody succeeding with autism and thriving, given their autistic nature, is learning to harness the superpowers of autism and mitigate the challenges. So that requires full acceptance of being autistic. And it's not a disease to be treated. There's no cure, right? It's likely genetic. There's some different theories on where it comes from. It doesn't really matter. A lot of us have it. And there's really nothing wrong with it. Now, I know for some parents, if your kids are severely autistic and they have trouble taking care of themselves, and that's pretty rough. I can only imagine how rough it was. I was pretty high functioning, so I could take care of myself, but I was not easy. I was a very loud, very intense, very obnoxious kid, broke stuff, made messes, couldn't follow rules, couldn't sit down. So very, very hard on my parents and the school system. And of course, so they were very hard on me. I was not diagnosed, so they didn't know I was autistic. They didn't understand it as well back then. And I didn't fit the stereotype of Asperger's, which later they decided was also just autism. So I wasn't diagnosed until I was 22 and was seeking therapy for relationship issues. And so by that time, I had so much shame around being broken and being wrong, and I couldn't follow rules, and there's something wrong with me, and punishment, and exclusion, and bullies, and so much shame. So actually discovering I was autistic was a little bit of a relief at that point, because it's like, oh, and now I understand what was going on. I wasn't just wrong or broken. I wasn't just not trying hard enough. I actually have a condition that makes this harder for me. But the therapist was really great to say, but also, there's some things that you love about yourself that are from autism. My creativity, the way I think outside the box, my really fast mind, the way I can behave or do things in a way without caring what anybody thinks, just tuning them out, my ultra sensitivity to sensation, to emotion. These are all superpowers, ultimately. Of course, I'll have a flip side and have challenges. So ever since the diagnosis, been on this journey to integrate this, and in my 30s started really speaking out a lot more and telling more people and learning that I had something to offer the autistic community and particularly parents of autistic kids. So here's the key thing. You got to teach your kid to celebrate their autism. At the very least, they need to accept it and embrace it. But because the world treats it as if there's something wrong with them, as if they're broken, because they already don't fit in, they already are going to deal with the struggles from people saying that they're not doing it right, whatever. You at home teaching them to celebrate this and say, hey, no, there's some really powerful, amazing things about your autism that make you this incredible kid. There's some challenges too that make this harder for you. It doesn't mean you don't have to do them. I can't change the world, unfortunately, but it does mean that I can have compassion that it's harder for you. So that's all I really wanted to hear was hey, making friends or following the rules at school is harder for me. This is tough for you. I get it that this is harder for you than the other kids. Instead, they just made it seem like I was they said, their kids are doing it, why can't you? And just filled me with shame. And then if they'd said, hey, how great you are at memorizing lines and how great you are on stage and how creative you are, like that's also part of your autism. This is the flip side. Like that would have been so powerful to hear as a kid. So to say this to your kids over and over again, celebrate their autistic traits and talk about autism. Don't you ever want to hide the fact that they're autistic, because that just makes them seem broken. They know they're different. There's no way around that. So you might as well tell them and talk about it all the time, how they're different, and then teach them to self-advocate and tell people they're autistic without shame. Say like, this is part of who I am. I think of it sort of like coming out. Autism is often treated medically, like it's a disease or some kind of mental illness. Like I'm a depressed person, You would want to say I'm depressed. You would say I have depression and it's treatable and I can treat it and I can be undepressed someday. Versus autism is more like being gay. It's like I was born this way. It's not the way the rest of society is. There's a community I'm a part of and there's nothing wrong with it inherently, but I do face some challenges and it's a part of who I am. And the science is very clear that non-straight people, in order to not have mental illness and a lot of problems, need to accept their identity, need to find community, need to learn how to say it overtly and not live in a secret. And so autism is the same way. I embrace that I am autistic, right? I do not have autism like somebody has depression. You would say a person has gayness, like I am gay. They are gay. Or the deaf communities embrace this a lot. People don't say that you have deafness, right? They say I am deaf, and they have the deaf communities like very well organized, and they're proud to be deaf, and they have all this whole subculture. It's really powerful. So autism has that now. There's all these cool forums and groups and support networks for parents and support networks for kids. And like there's, the Autism Society of America has incredible resources. I'm on the board of Autism Society of Texas. They really focus on bringing autistic people together and creating these resources to live the best possible life as an autistic person, rather than trying to hide it or demonize it. So before I get off of this, I want to talk about ABA therapy, because it was not something we had when I was a kid. And it is the most commonly prescribed treatment for kids with autism or support. It's got an ugly history of trying to basically make kids less autistic. That was how it began, was we're going to, kind of train or punish or bribe autism out of these kids. It's no longer like that. So that is no longer the case, but that is where it came from. So a lot of autistic people hate it. The key thing with ABA therapy is it must be treated like learning English as a second language. So think of ABA as teaching autistic kids how to be in a non-autistic world, how to speak and communicate and live with non-autistic people in a way that they will understand. The data on English as a second language is really clear that when people come from other countries and kids come and they need to learn English, that if you don't teach them to celebrate their native language at the same time that you teach them English, they develop shame about their culture. They unconsciously take on the idea that English and American culture is superior to their native language and their native people, which is a very dangerous concept and causes a lot of psychological issues. So in the English as second language community, they've done a really great job at like doing both. Like, how do we say, this is your language and it's great, and we're going to teach you to learn English also because you live in America and people speak English, you need to learn it. But there's nothing wrong with their native language. Continue to read books in that, learn it, speak it at home. So the same thing is true with autism. When you bring in an ABA therapist, or when you're working with your kid to teach them how to be in the world, in a non-autistic world, be sure that you have this idea that like, hey, there's nothing wrong with stemming, moving your hands, rocking, things that they do to feel soothed. You never want to say that there's something wrong with that. That's who you are and it's great to do. I'm just going to teach you that the impact of that in a job interview, the impact of that on a date is this. And so you might want to learn some other coping mechanisms to do, that are a little more subtle in those circumstances, just because they don't get it, not because it's wrong. And then when you're on your own, when you're at home, do it all STEM all day long. And that's just an example of a variety of things that they teach autistic kids with ABA. So just make sure your ABA therapist is in no way implying that this way of controlling their autistic tendencies is because autism is wrong or bad or inferior. It's just a skill that will help them survive in the non-autistic world, and at home be as autistic as you want, right? Like, when you're with your friends and you're with your autistic other kids in the community, like it's great. And there's certain ways in relationships that you can be, your full self and not. And that's just life. We all have to learn those skills of how we code switch. So that's the critical thing is, teach it as a second language. And but overall, celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. Like the more you celebrate the autism, the more you talk about it, the more you feed their gifts, right? Don't try to make them a little bit good at everything. This generalist approach the education system has that doesn't work in the economy. Most powerful people are really good at one thing. They're better than everybody else at one thing. And that's an autistic superpower we have. We can hyper focus on one thing, go really deep on it. That's what our economy needs. It's what's also going to build self-esteem in them because they can be really, really good at this one thing rather than try to be a little bit good at all these things that with autism, we're more extreme. We're really, really good at something and really bad at others. So like I'm, better than anybody, I'm as best as it can get in public speaking and performing and being on stage. I am worse than the average person on the street at doing math or spreadsheets, anything data technical related. Like literally you could pull somebody off the street, they'd be better at it than me. That's the kind of extremes you're dealing with. So if with autistic kids, let them do their passion all day long. Let them go deep into it. Feed it, feed it, feed it. Because it's what's going to make them successful and what's going to also build their self-esteem. And again, point out that they're so good at this and they're so passionate about this because they're autistic. And how cool is that? So hope that helps. Feel free to reach out if you have questions about your specific autistic kid or person in your life. And please drop in the comments any questions you have about how to deal with an autistic kid. Please like and share the podcast for helping us reach more people, and share this with an autistic family in your life, and stay dedicated.